Hi, welcome to the podcast. I'm Mark Graven. We're joined today by Michael Lombard, and I'll introduce him a little bit more in a second. I can't believe this is your first time on the podcast, Michael.
I know, but it's an honor to be here with you, Mark. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks. And, I had to go back and look. We've collaborated on different things, webinars, and we've known each other a long time. So I'm glad we could do the podcast here today for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Michael right now is the managing director for the East Bay service area of Kaiser Permanente. And, I think we'll talk a little bit about your, back then was transition into healthcare and the different types of leadership roles you've had. And then we're also going to give a preview for a keynote talk that Michael has put together. It's going to be a team effort, as you'll hear us discuss. But we do want to mention the AME Virtual Conference. So it's been converted to a completely virtual format this year, AME being the Association for Manufacturing Excellence, even though there's a lot of, there's always a lot of healthcare attendees. But that event is going to be October 27th to 29th this year. I'll put registration links in the show notes, and Michael's session is going to be on Wednesday, October 28th. So we'll come back and talk about that a little bit.
And I believe the amazing Dr. Toussaint's going to be presenting at the conference too. So that right there is worth the price of admission.
Yeah, John Toussaint, a frequent guest on the podcast, and Michael, we'll I'm sure eventually we'll get you into that category. There's sort of like there's a 5-timers club like hosting Saturday Night Live.
I'm up for it, man. Let's do it.
I don't send out a blazer though.
That's all good.
Michael and I know each other going back to days in the Dallas-Fort Worth area when before Michael got into healthcare. And so maybe, first question for you, how and why did you kind of shift directions in your career to get involved in healthcare?
Yeah, I grew up in Central Florida. My pops was in the construction business. I grew up in the construction business, and from the age of 10 years old, I was working on a roofing crew in the summers. And then after college, went to work for a national home builder that had a really strong QI, quality improvement program, because they were partially site built, partially factory built. So they had a kind of an industrial component to their business. And heard about something called lean and started getting trained up on that. Loved it. Just fell in love with continuous improvement science, and ended up connecting with you through some blogging that we were doing, and ended up in Dallas where you were living at the time. And the housing market took a plunge in the 2008 recession, and
right.
I was definitely starting to think about what the future may hold. And I had never considered healthcare, and you, as a great mentor, said, hey, you should maybe think about it. There might be an opportunity for you to apply some of what you're learning with lean in healthcare, and made some connections. I think we had a cool pizza party in your backyard where you were making the pizzas with your pizza oven, and I actually met somebody from Children's Medical Center, and
yeah.
I fell in love. The first time I went and just visited for a site visit, it brought back all of my childhood kind of memories of my brother who has cerebral palsy, which was a result of a medical error during childbirth. It brought back all the memories of spending time with him at the Shriners Hospital in Tampa, all throughout my childhood, and how I guess subconsciously maybe I really wanted to be in healthcare and just never had brought it to the forefront of my consciousness. So kind of owe a little bit of a debt of gratitude to you for that, Mark, for helping me along the way there. So that's how I got into healthcare in 2010.
Yeah, so a decade in healthcare, and it's been really exciting to see the different roles that you've taken in different organizations. And I feel like now the tables are turned. I'm going to ask you to mentor me, and I mean that seriously, because you've moved up into different leadership roles that I would I haven't had the opportunity. I've been outside consultants. It's different path, but. My point being, it's been great to see you move out of process improvement circles into some direct leadership roles. I was wondering if you could share what a couple of those roles were and what it was like, kind of shifting into direct line leadership, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. I guess it was right around the time that my first child was born, so 2014 or so. I've been in healthcare for about 4 years, and there was an opportunity to work for a small company, well, medium-sized company called Cornerstone Healthcare Group based out of Dallas. And they had 18 facilities across 6 states and healthcare facilities. And so I went to work at that office as their CI person, kind of at the national level. And through some of the work that I was doing there, I got to be really close partners with one of our operational VPs, and he had a vacancy in a hospital CEO position in Sulphur, Louisiana, which is right next to Lake Charles, Louisiana, which just got hit with another hurricane last night.
Right. Gosh, right.
After a month ago getting hit with one pretty bad. But so shout out to my amazing Cajun friends in Southwest Louisiana.
Yeah.
And it was a hospital that was struggling. There was a lot of changes in Medicare reimbursement policy that was going to affect specialty hospitals like this one. And so we didn't know what the future was going to hold, but it was going to be a stretched role for me to just get some experience. So I went down there thinking I was going to be down there for 2 months, ended up being there for 2 years. But the good news is we turned it around. We used a lot of the improvement science techniques that we use in our work to drive the business growth. And it was a nice learning journey, very intense, met a lot of great friends, and kind of helped me, getting out of my comfort zone and into the learning zone for 2 solid years, like intensely. I think cleared my mind as to what I wanted to do going forward. So it was very valuable from a learning perspective.
Yeah. So then you had the opportunity, as I mentioned, you're now at Kaiser Permanente, Oakland, East Bay area. We see, for those watching the video, we see, San Francisco as the virtual backdrop behind you. So what was it like then going from, that direct hospital leadership role, stepping back then into the process improvement function, or, and how is that framed at Kaiser Permanente? There's always different language that organizations use. So maybe you can tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing recently there, or at least when you got into that role. We'll get to the more recent next.
Sure. Yeah, so being in Louisiana in that hospital CEO role, with all of the operational responsibility, I did realize that I didn't really care about the job titles or that stuff wasn't important to me. And I came into contact with a guy named Lawrence Hamilton at Kaiser Permanente East Bay at the time. And we had some nice conversations, but I was so focused on the project in Louisiana that I wasn't really interested in making a move across the country. But then when I met him and got to know him better, and some of the team and the culture in the East Bay, which is like the Oakland kind of flagship area where Kaiser Permanente originally started, I just fell in love with the diversity of it and the willingness to continually change and improve. It's a very progressive kind of culture. And so we took a risk, moved across the country, and went back into a kind of predominantly PI role, which we in the East Bay, we call it our patient care improvement system, PCIS, because we never have any, can't have a shortage of acronyms. So, more the merrier, I guess. I just like to think of it as the East Bay way.
Sure.
It's just our use of improvement science to improve the care that we deliver and add joy and meaning to the work that we do. And so I've been there about 2.5 years now, and starting to I came in fairly early in our lean journey. It was about maybe year 3 when I came in. So now we're coming up on like year 6, so fairly new, fairly early on in the journey. And but it really has paid off the investment that we put in when we started getting into 2020 and a lot of the challenges that we faced. So we were more prepared than we would have been otherwise because of our investment in our people, investment in our mindset, skill set, and tool set around improvement science.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about 2020 and what you've been doing, what you've been continuing to learn. You talk about improvement science. And in my experience, that's a phrase that I've really only heard in healthcare. Would you agree with that observation?
Yeah. I've only really started working it into my lexicon maybe in the last 6 months or a year or something like that. So yeah, I wouldn't know the origins of it, but it seems like it's pretty common now over the last year in healthcare.
Yeah, and I think the Institute for Healthcare Improvement has been using that phrase as a bit of a catch-all, and they have certain methodology, but like, there are different flavors of improvement styles and different language, and at its core, a lot of it is very much the same. But when I think, and I love that phrase, improvement science. We talk about scientific problem solving, scientific thinking. So one of those methodologies and frameworks and set of language I know is really important to you, Michael, is the Toyota Kata approach. And I'll link to a webinar that you did with me for KaiNexus a few years ago about Kata. But why, from your perspective, why is that Toyota Kata framework and thought process so important to you?
Yeah, I think it has to do with just, the fact that when I got into the kind of the CI continuous improvement world, I didn't have a strong background in, I'm not an engineer, statistician, none of the things that would have prepared you. So I was always on this learning journey, and something about the using every step, into the next PDSA cycle which is kind of integral to the Kata approach, really appealed to me. So when I think it was in 2014, or maybe 2012, where I read the Toyota Kata book by Mike Rother, who's a good friend and mentor of mine. I read it for the third time, and first two times it resonated, but I didn't know what to do with it. And the third time, I happened to be at a hospital that was looking to really develop its leadership team to be the leaders of continuous improvement, working with the frontline staff and not a central PI team, which that resonated with me. I said, well, this is a way, we can really start to get some practice at coaching and running experiments and stuff like that. And so I think we set up a kind of what do they call an advanced team. Take half a dozen to 10 people. You're all kind of learning together, and you start doing daily coaching cycles together, and just getting a lot of practice. And at one point, I think I was tracking it on a run chart, and I was doing probably up to 8 coaching cycles a day. It's 4 hours a day of coaching basically. And I did that, held up that pace for maybe 6 months, and then kind of went to a more sustainable pattern after that. But it was intense, got a lot of practice, and I realized, this isn't really just a way to do process improvement. It's actually a way to invest in your mindset and your skill set. And when you start to do that, you start to form some new reflexes, like things that require more kind of deliberate thought start to become more instinctual. And that's when I realized it's just kind of a way to nurture your leadership style and your leadership skills. And that really paid off when I went into that hospital CEO role, and where you're starting with just your leadership style before you're adding on any layers of PI complexity. You're just starting off with just, here I am, here's how I think, and let's see if we can start to improve. And when you do that, the way you do it, the little nuances of how you do it can make a big difference. So it's nice to be able to have something to fall back on. And what I fall back on is that kind of structured sense making or scientific thinking and that coaching style. That's my kind of go-to if I am uncertain, I'm not sure if I'm fitting in or if I'm being effective or not. I just kind of go back to the fundamentals. And I think that's probably, I think there was something in the Toyota Kata book that actually said that one interpretation of the Japanese, I think it's Japanese word kata, is a balance, like a way to find balance or something like that.
It's also sometimes described as a routine, right?
Yeah, a routine for kind of maintaining balance, kind of like the fundamentals. So yeah, that kind of resonated with me and has become kind of part of my personal practice as a leader.
Yeah. So, and look, I'm not an expert on Toyota Kata. I'm maybe a little conversational in it, but, I'm curious, when you were in that direct leadership role and you're running an organization, you're developing other leaders, is there an opportunity when you talk about defining the challenge to define the challenge differently, maybe at a higher level, looking at organizational challenge as opposed to process improvement challenge?
Yeah, totally. If you look at the Kata model, the first step of it is to understand the direction or challenge.
Yeah. And
there's like, if you're going in like I was in Louisiana, where there's no kind of experience or muscle memory with much PI work at all, or any of the improvement science methods, then you might use a very simple version of understanding the direction or challenge. You might just say, wouldn't it be awesome if, and see kind of what would the ideal condition be for whatever it is we're working on, and you work back from that. That's a very like a starter version of doing strategic visioning. Then if you maybe get comfortable with that technique and maybe you want to add a little bit more of a technique there, you start to get into things like value stream mapping, for example, which Mike Rother, who wrote the Toyota Kata book, also co-authored the Learning to See instructional guide on how to do value stream mapping. And so viewing that future state value stream as a big challenge, like how are we going to actually operate according to that future state map? There's a lot of things we're going to have to learn in order to achieve our future state, and that's a challenge. It may fit into that 6 to 12 month time frame. Often it's measurable. We're going to know what our value stream indicators are that are going to say we're achieving our future state, and that can provide clarity of direction. In our where I'm at right now in the East Bay, we use that what is awesome kind of technique quite a bit, and we're starting to get a little bit more mature in understanding breakthrough objectives. If you want to use kind of the Hoshin style, what are your 2-3 kind of critical breakthrough objectives for the year? And that fits nicely into that understand the direction or challenge part of the improvement kata.
Yeah. And so, boy, the word challenge is a word that has come up a lot in 2020. The year is throwing a lot of challenges at us, the pandemic and additionally so, and we'll get into that a little bit more here, challenge on top of challenge. But I think it's really interesting, the approach that you've chosen to take here for the AME conference event, again, that virtual conference in your session on October 28th. So, I want to talk about what you've been experiencing and what Kaiser and what your community there has been experiencing in 2020. But, the title for the session, to share that with people, is Striving Together in a Crisis, How Improvement Science Can Build Resiliency in a Crisis, and perhaps even progress complex social issues. So, we'll sort of unpack, who else you've invited to be part of this session and the format and everything. But maybe let's talk first about the challenges here in 2020.
Yeah. And I mean, first of all, just acknowledging that everybody literally, across the globe, dealing with a lot of these same challenges. And so there's nothing unique about my experience there, except working specifically in healthcare. There's a little nuance there. And then, compounding that with what's going on the West Coast with natural disasters, wildfires, and a lot of social issues as well. So yeah, let's unpack that a little bit. So it actually goes back to pre-pandemic time. So around September of 2019, we were, at KP, we were, achieving tremendous results and continuing to march forward. But we had some negotiations. We needed to negotiate our contract with our labor unions, our valued labor partners. Our contract was set to expire, and so there was a potential of a very large labor strike, like the largest labor strike in the history of the healthcare industry. And my team, our central PI team in the East Bay, was tasked with organizing our preparation efforts in case there was, we called it our contingency planning, in case there was a strike. And so that began like this 12-month journey of kind of one crisis to the next. I think it was later in that year, we lost our iconic CEO, Bernard Tyson.
Right.
an amazing leader who had really done some innovative things in healthcare to promote, equity and of outcomes across the spectrum of different types of socioeconomic issues. And so it was a real loss to the organization. And then right on the heels of that, the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, we were asked to bring all of the tools and techniques that we know from improvement science to bear, i.e., hey, we need to set up a drive-up clinic where folks can get their nasal pharyngeal swabbing done for COVID tests. And normally that would be something that would take place over like a year. And we did it in 24 hours. So it was like ultra form of rapid cycle testing.
Yeah.
But we did it with quality, with compliance, with safety. All the things that we hold near and dear to our heart. We weren't willing to sacrifice on that, but we had to be fast. And that's just one example. There's, we had to do a bunch of transformative things like that. Doubling the capacity of our ICU, over the course of a week. Converting over. We have a massive primary care footprint. We've got almost 400,000 members in the East Bay alone, and we provide their primary care and specialty care. And we switched over from our predominant delivery mechanism being in-person care to virtual care, so video and phone and secure messaging over the course of a weekend. Right. We're talking about, thousands and thousands and thousands of visits. And so, so that's kind of what the last 7 months has been, or the last year, really, if you go back to the labor contingency planning. And then just to kind of exacerbate things on the West Coast, as you know, Mark, we've had, 4 of the 5 largest wildfires in the history of California over the last couple of months, some of them within about an hour of the East Bay. And then one thing that I loved about the East Bay, and one of the reasons why I come here was because of the diversity of the Oakland area and the Berkeley area and the progressive thought. And by the way, I'm not political, so when I say progressive, I'm not talking about political. I'm talking about just advancing ideas. Mm-hmm. And so, we've definitely shown our voice in terms of our being dissatisfied with any kind of systemic inequality. And there's no shame and blame game. I don't do that. I'm just talking about, just like with my PI hat on, looking at when we have systems issues, let's, have respect for people, and let's get to the root cause and see what improvement we can make. So, it's all happened simultaneously in parallel. But yeah, we're hanging in there, and that's what we're going to talk about a little bit at the at our joint AME keynote that we're going to do together.
Yeah. So tell us about 2 of the physicians that you've worked with and that you've invited to be part of this session, Rita Ng and Carla Wicks. Tell me a little bit about them and why you've got them involved in the session.
Yeah. I mean, a big smile comes on my face whenever I think about these docs. And it's really, they represent, we have about 1,000 docs in the East Bay, and they're just some of the most incredible people I've ever met. It's just an honor to work with them. My partner for our PI program in the East Bay is named Dr. Ranga. He's another one that's just incredible. But there's too many to name, but I'll just talk about a little bit about Rita and Carla. So Rita is one of our 2 physicians in chief for the East Bay. So she's a cardiologist, and she's I think she was the first ever Asian American Miss California. Yeah. Amazing piano player. And she and I are right around the same age, and our kids are right around the same age. And she actually came into her physician in chief role the same exact month that I came in to join the East Bay. And so she was new to that executive level of leadership, and I was brand new to California and to Kaiser Permanente. And so we've kind of committed that we'll be partners in our journey. And she's really helped me, and along with some of our other leaders that I mentioned before, Lawrence Hamilton and others, really helped me. I always joke, because she's a cardiologist, to say, you're teaching me how to lead from the heart. And just one of my corny dad jokes or whatever. But But we'll talk about this during the AME with her, but she's really helping me understand how to be vulnerable, how to be transparent about this is how we're feeling, and it's okay. And that's just really never was my style. I was always more of just like, let's just get to the problem solving, and let's leave emotion at the door and that
from the
kind
head.
of thing.
Yeah.
What's that?
From the head.
Yeah, exactly.
From the brain, the
yes.
logical, rational, right? Yeah.
And like my whole practice of Kata is about rigorous sense making and trying to use the thinking, the intellectual part of your brain more than the emotional part of your brain. And anyway, I was making some false conclusions there that you can't lead from the heart and use your brain.
Right.
And that's been humbling and a good learning journey for me, and that'll come through, I think, when we have Rita participate in the AME event.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Then Carla, I don't know, I guess it was about 2 years ago or so, she and I were talking about how we can incorporate the coaching kata into our physician practice. And I was like, yeah, I have all these wacky ideas. Like maybe we could, coach our physicians on how they engage with the patients or whatever. And then she's like, oh, way ahead of you. And she shared the story of, she had started coaching she's an OBGYN doc, by the way. And she started sharing a story of when she had started using the coaching kata with one of her pregnant patients who was dealing with some psychosocial issues that was actually threatening her pregnancy. And she had some really great results engaging with her patient using that structured sense-making approach of the kata. And so I said, we got to get this down on video. We just did a quick iPhone video with one take and uploaded it, and I shared it at the Kata Summit, and she just became kind of my idol after that. And then she was working with us in the East Bay, and then I was bummed because she got this, well, I was happy for her, but she got this promotion to our regional offices of KP. So, Permanente Medical Group, largest medical group in the country, I believe, multidisciplinary medical group. And so she's now the regional lead for equity, inclusion, and diversity, and reducing disparities in outcome for this large medical group. And I said, with her coaching skill and her amazing, compassion, and she's such a kind person, I said, I can't think of anybody better to coach me as I became interested in this topic of, can we apply the rigorous sense-making and scientific thinking and PI, to these thorny social issues of whether it's, violence or inequality or just any of the forms of waste that we have in our society that may be due to systemic issues.
Yeah. And so, how would you respond? This is not me directly challenging you on this, but I know there might be some who think, well, look, it's the AME conference, and we normally talk about things that are really core lean business issues as maybe traditionally defined in the lean space. Why bring this topic forward? Talking about important issues of equity, diversity, inclusion, social justice. Why bring that to the conference?
I think I'll answer that in two parts. One is the unique moment that we're in. I mean, we're literally in uncharted territory. And a lot of my assumptions about society and life and just survival have been challenged over the last 7 months in particular. And so I'm in the headspace where I'm willing to be humble and think about, what the future may hold and new ways of doing things. And I'm suspecting that some folks out there in the improvement science community in the CI world maybe are also re-examining aspects of their life and society. That's one. And then secondly, it's just a natural, logical leap, I think. My hypothesis is that it's natural if you encounter systemic issues in a business where the business is losing money or their quality is poor, you don't go and, attack the person, you attack the process, you get to the root cause, you test your ideas, you use improvement science to improve the systemic issues. And to me, it's a natural leap to then if I encounter systemic issues in other arenas, whether it's a person's health, because our body is a system, whether it's our family's wellness, families are systems of humans, or if it's our justice system or whatever it may be. All I'm doing is keeping that PI hat on and staying in the rational and staying in the structured sense-making mindset, or at least I'm trying to. Right. I'm not that great at it. I'll be honest. I just like anybody probably succumb to fear, and I don't want to be accused of being a racist or anything like that, because I don't believe I am. And so those things trigger me, and I battle with that, but I'm trying to get better at it. And all I can do is just be willing to go out on a limb. Yeah. At the AME conference, I don't think that's too much to ask of me, given all the positives that I've been given in my life through improvement science. Yeah, and as I've explored, and well, you talk about this being uncharted territory. I'm having a lot of conversations with people privately and publicly that I frankly was not a part of before this year. Part of sort of just taking inventory of life and the role we play and trying to create an improved system, if you will. So society as a system is a system, and it's a heavy lift, but if we can do something that makes a positive contribution, baby steps can be helpful. I think hopefully it doesn't just feel good, but hopefully it's helpful. But when we talk about systems, to me, I think there's a parallel. If we look at a healthcare system, again, speaking very generally, I'm not pointing this at Kaiser Permanente, but this is just general healthcare or observation is that there are very systemic problems in healthcare that lead to bad outcomes, harm to patients, and sometimes death. And I think healthcare, for the most part, has gotten better at looking at systemic causes and systemic drivers of actions and behaviors and even attitudes that can lead to problems in healthcare. That we can have a bad system that's full of very good, hardworking, well-intended individuals. Mm-hmm. And so, some of the pushback that I've gotten on bringing some of these conversations forward through my blog or through my podcast, I had somebody who emailed, paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of me. I could tell he was upset. And he said, I'm tired of all this talk of systemic racism telling us that we're all racist. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's what systemic racism is describing. And I don't think any of my guests have said that. And that's the thing I think is interesting to try to think through. Systemic racism does not mean everybody in that system is a racist, but yet there are still bad practices and certainly bad or inequitable outcomes. I know I kind of threw a lot out there, but kind of curious to hear your reactions on thinking about, systems and systemic drivers. We can have bad systems with a lot of good people. Yeah. System. Yeah. First, I'll just say I don't make any assumptions about anybody's what's going on inside of their heart and their head. Mm-hmm. I don't accuse anybody of racism, and I don't think that that's helpful when we trigger people in that way, make them feel like they're being accused. And so I'll start with that. But I'll share an example. So kind of by way of analogy, I guess, or similar experience. So when I was in that hospital CEO role in Louisiana, we were doing a quick turnaround, and we weren't always, I wasn't always following the lean playbook to the letter of the law. I wasn't always, it's not a law. Yeah. You know what I mean, though? We were, I was in this operational leadership role, and some of my, we wouldn't always document every standard work and really, we were kind of operating in a really fast pace, and sometimes I would develop some bad habits. And we had folks from our quality corporate office come in and say, Michael, you're not doing the best practice. You're not following best practice for documenting standard work, et cetera. And here I am, supposedly, kind of a advocate for these lean kind of PI principles. And I'm not, so I felt like they were coming in and I'm like, just, go away, just kind of like, leave me alone. I don't want to be accused of these things. And I was very in kind of a emotional state about things. And then when I had some distance from it, I was able to look back and I was like, yeah, I was actually, what they were saying was actually correct. And I was just being a little bit emotional about it. But that feeling is valid though. When you are doing something that you feel is right, we were trying to keep this hospital open and we were having success. And, you feel like you're doing things the right way. You don't harbor any hate in your heart. You're not doing anything that's wrong. Right. And you've got people, you're hearing these criticisms or whatever. And now that's a very, kind of more innocuous example of being criticized.
But that reaction that happens is, that defensiveness or an emotional reaction that is a natural and expected human response.
Totally.
Yeah.
We have to have respect for people and say, that's part of our hardware. I'm not a neuroscientist, but the limbic system or whatever drives the neurochemicals that like trigger stress or whatever, they're real. And we have to be cognizant of that and respect it. And it's our survival instinct. So we need to appreciate it and be gentle and be coaches and help us get out of that limbic system and into the more, thinking part of our brain. And let's see if we can learn, something from it, but if you're in that accusatory kind of feeling like you're being accused headspace, that's totally natural. And, we should try to, as a team, as a human race, we should try to kind of get past that, because there's things that you never know or what you're going to find if you start, poking around these topics that maybe we don't have a lot of, maybe we're not used to talking about social issues. Maybe it's not part of our muscle memory. Maybe it's not a skill set that we have and we don't feel comfortable doing it, but you never know what you might uncover that can make things better for your employees, for your family, for your society. Who knows? I don't know. I certainly don't know. This is all just a hypothesis, but it's something that I'm willing to explore.
And I appreciate how, and I feel the same way in some of these conversations. I appreciate how you're framing it as not having all the answers or being an expert. I think the lean philosophy and the Kata framework is about getting to the frontier of our knowledge, or maybe getting to the frontier of our comfort level. I believe strongly the idea of that learning comes from discomfort. That being uncomfortable is an expected part of a learning process. I don't know, when I work out, I hear in my earbuds, the virtual trainer says, like, if it doesn't make you uncomfortable, you're not. You hear this in different contexts, but I think these are topics that are on the forefront. To me, I think it's absolutely fair game to talk about this in podcasts and conferences, because we're applying what we know from different realms of problem solving to bigger, really important problems. So I appreciate your willingness to come out and say, look, I'm not an expert, but let's think through this. Let's learn together. Let's have a conversation. And so, I wanted to also kind of come to the format that you chose. You're not standing up there giving a virtual PowerPoint presentation. Well, you'll probably be sitting when you're doing it. But why the format, and sort of talk about the format and what you've helped structure?
Sure. Well, actually, building on what you just said around getting it out of that comfort zone and into that kind of learning zone, I wanted to do that with the format. I wanted to try something that was, I've done a lot of the, standard keynotes where you deliver your slides, and they're really fun. But I didn't want to do something that was fun. I want to do something that was going to challenge me. And it certainly has. Like, we're talking, our format is going to include you and I discussing things, kind of like a podcast format. It's going to include some video clips with Dr. Rita Ng and Carla Wicks. And it's going to include some Q&A with Rita and Carla at the end as well. And it's a little bit challenging to I found out that I am not despite the fact that I do have a t-shirt that says UCLA Film School, I am not meant to be a film producer, because it is hard. It is really difficult. I'm learning, but it's a challenge. But I wanted to do that because I think that it provides more perspectives. We get 4 of us talking about it instead of just my perspective. And it also, there's, the real work is not at the conference. It's, it's in our heads, and it's forever. And so it's really forced me to really think more deliberately about the leading from the heart concept and the systemic issues. Has made me start to tighten up my thinking on these topics, because I've deliberately engaged with folks like Rita and Carla and yourself, and we're going through a lot of rapid discussions, kind of like rapid cycle testing on this topic, and just saying, am I on solid ground here logically? Am I thinking straight? And having coaches like y'all, it really helps in that. Real quick, I want to also, in that same vein of comfort zone and struggle, just a quick shout out to Professor Jim Stigler and team down at UCLA. I had a chance to go do some coaching with them this past December, and they're doing amazing things around applying improvement science to learning, like learning systems, how to make learning easier. And they do a lot of A/B testing of different ways of presenting material, and it's just phenomenal. But if the audience wants to Google Jim Stigler, UCLA YouTube video, there's a video where he talks about his learning model, and he specifically calls out that with no struggle, there's no learning, like kind of debunks the idea of, learning is fun. Well, yeah, it's fun when you achieve the learning and then you get that satisfaction of mastery of a topic, but along the way, it should be a struggle. And that's, I think that's one of the most profound things that I've learned over the last couple of years, is just the value of the struggle and how it actually has the knock-on effect of creating resiliency, mental resiliency, and a kind of a self-efficacy that, we don't know the answers, but sometimes when we're confronted with a big problem, we don't know the answers, but we have the mindset and the kind of the ruggedness to get there. Yeah. And that's really paid off, I think, over the last 7 months for practitioners of improvement science as they're dealing with some of these societal challenges and pandemic.
Yeah. So one other question comes to mind, and again, I'm just throwing that out for conversation. It's not an easy question to answer, but I mentioned earlier incremental improvement, and one thing I've been more mindful of is the need the need for incremental improvement versus breakthrough improvement, to frame it that way. When we look at issues involving inequity, injustice, systemic racism, I am not affected by those things on a day-to-day basis as a white man. So one thing I've tried to be more cognizant of, and I've had, conversations with some Black colleagues about this, is, if I might say incremental improvement is fine. But the reality is other people who are affected by these issues and sometimes on a daily basis might not be in a comfort zone of being of looking for incremental improvement. They say, hey, people are dying, people's lives are being affected. We need breakthrough improvement now. So it's kind of a thought more so than a question, but I'm curious if you have talked through, even within the organization, how do we strike the balance and understand when incremental improvement is okay and when breakthrough improvement is necessary or possible?
Yeah, I think that's kind of our reflex where I'm at in the East Bay, is we see the overall challenge, but we focus on what is the next target condition, and then narrowing down even further, what's the next obstacle on the way to that target condition, and then what are we going to do to try to remove that obstacle. So we try to funnel it down to the very smallest next step that produces learning. Mm-hmm. And that's our kind of way of kind of probing reality a little bit, because we acknowledge we try to develop this recognition of when we hit our knowledge threshold, and realize that we don't see reality the way it actually is all the time, because we have all of our cognitive biases, right? We can't escape them, but we can start to recognize them. And so when we do that, we start to we increase the value that we place on small learning experiments, because we see that they accumulate and they add up and they start stacking up. Our skill set starts stacking up, our knowledge base starts stacking up. And even if it's taking us a little longer to get to that outcome that we're looking for, we're accumulating all of this. It's kind of like the difference between kinetic energy and potential energy, going to 12th grade physics or whatever. We're stacking up that stored energy, and we're getting ready to be able to apply it in ways that we wouldn't have if we would have gotten a good outcome and then moved on. And so we've always talked about, improvement as a continuous journey, continuous improvement, Kaizen. And now as we pull in other fields of science, I just referenced physics. There's science around what is reality. Another shout out, Donald Hoffman at UC Irvine is a great, if you want to watch some of his YouTube videos, just challenging our perception of what is going on with a problem, acknowledging when we've met our knowledge threshold, and then taking what is the smallest next little exploration that we can do to start stacking up some learning. That's a different mindset. That's a robust mindset. You can do that anywhere and anytime. You don't need a big conglomerate of a team. You don't need, you just need to know who can you go talk to and get more information right now and start to learn it. What can you go observe, go to the Gemba and look at a process. And you can apply that, because what in the natural world is not dependent on a process. I mean, there's biological processes, there's chemical process, everything is processes. So processes can be, we can probe them, we can examine them, we can learn from them. And if we have the right tools and skills and mindset. So, and I'm fortunate in healthcare that, I have an avenue to address some of the issues around disparities in outcomes. When you work for an integrated care delivery system, the way I do, we've got all the right players at the table. We've got the insurance company, the docs, the hospitals, the clinics. Everybody's all in one company with KP. So we're able to, I don't have to focus on the huge, large, enormous issues that society is dealing with. I have opportunity to kind of narrow in and focus on how can we, for example, reduce poor outcomes related to hypertension within the African American community. That's something that we're actively working on right now in the East Bay, and we're doing it. I just had a coaching cycle yesterday with the leads for this program that we're doing. It's an innovative program that was developed in a very humble, small way. We said it's called House Calls, and it's a way to do kind of outreach to a bulk number of people at once through webinars and such. And we said, let's just start with an MVP, a minimum viable product, very humble goal. Let's just get a version of a webinar that we can deliver, that we can then collect data from and learn from and make it better. And so we're borrowing from Silicon Valley and Lean Startup and Eric Ries to do that. And it's nice to have that avenue, because you can't deal with it all at once. So you have your lane that you can really make a difference in, and see if some of the learnings from that lane can be ported over into, legal issues or criminal justice or all the other lanes that I'm really not that knowledgeable on, but I'm trying to be more knowledgeable about.
Yeah. So that spirit of learning and increasing our knowledge is coming through in what you say. And I know that'll come through from you and Dr. Ng and Dr. Wicks in the AME session. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you for inviting me to help moderate that and play some role in the session.
If I could just say, it's a real honor and treat to have you facilitate that panel for us, Mark. And I really appreciate the learning journey that you're on, and some of the things you're doing with Deandra Wardell and others with #root cause racism. it's inspiring, and it really inspired me on this topic. And so thank you.
Well, thanks. And yeah, thanks go to Deandra and others who I've been working with and talking to and learning from. And yeah, it's happy to be a part of that. So again, today we've been joined by Michael Lombard. He's going to be one of the keynote speakers. Man, I'm proud of you. I'm going to say, look at Michael up there. I'm sorry that, we're doing the virtual format this year. It would have been great to be up on a physical stage with you in Toronto, but we adapt, right? So AME is doing the virtual conference this year, October 27th to 29th. I'll put a registration link for that in the show notes. And again, Michael's session is Wednesday, October 28th. And again, by calling it Michael's session, it's Michael as kind of the facilitator and organizer of the session. That includes Dr. Rita Ng, Dr. Carla Wicks from Kaiser Permanente. So Michael, thank you for doing that. Thank you for being a guest, first-time guest on the podcast. We'll have you back and talk about other things, and maybe we'll do another session, kind of recap lessons learned and how that session goes.
That would be lovely. Thank you, Mark.